Almost every single company that I talk with is thinking about a mobile app or some sort of software as a medical device to expand their product line. Or if it's a startup company, a lot of times their first product is software as a medical device. But just because you can develop software and it works doesn't mean it has what it needs in order to get through the FDA. There's a big difference between something working and something that we can actually get the FDA to agree this is okay, this is cleared for marketing in the US, because you need to be able to validate the software. And there's a specific set of standards that you have to follow when you want to validate software for a medical device. So before you go and hire somebody to write your software, if you have your own expertise, before you develop any code whatsoever, you need to do a couple of things first. And that doesn't mean build out an entire quality system, build a DHM. You need to do a few things first before you jump in. So I'm going to give you a little bit of instructions on how to kick off your software project. If you follow this advice, it will eliminate a lot of frustration that will come later. So bear with me a couple of seconds here as I show you the process. So number one, you need a few procedures. You don't need a whole quality system because you're only in development. You're not marketing the product. You're not selling the product. You're not registered with the FDA yet. You're just developing your first medical device. If it's software as a medical device, you need four things. Number one, you need software validation procedure. And there's a standard for that. And I indicate that here, 62304. IEC standard 62304 is for the software lifecycle. Number two, you need a risk management procedure. Now, there is a 14971 standard for that, and that's what everybody will follow. But there's actually a better standard even than that, and I did a previous video about this. It's the IEC 80002-1 standard. And that particular standard is how to apply risk management to software, how to apply 14971 to for risk management to software, because the way you apply risk management techniques to software is a little different from how you apply it to other medical devices. Starting with, number one, you don't estimate the probability of occurrence of harm. You assume that it will occur 100% of the time. So that's a fundamentally different approach to software. So you sort of need a different procedure for risk management activities and risk estimation for software products. The third thing you need is usability engineering. This is the IEC 62366-1 standard for usability engineering. That's a relatively new standard, and there are new guidance documents on usability and human factors. But the FDA has seen more and more, when you make small changes to software, you change the user interface, it becomes easier to cause inadvertently some use errors. So you need that piece too. And for almost all the new software submissions we're submitting, we have to submit usability validation. And the third piece is cybersecurity, and that's the newest of all. And that was covered under a new guidance document was released in it was actually 2023. And then January of 2024, they released a new eStar template that tells you what documents they want attached. So you need those four things covered. And that last one has also another standard. It's AAMI TIR 57. And there's actually a flow chart in there. And the flow chart for the cybersecurity process looks just like the flow chart for the risk management process. They just substituted the risk analysis activities for the cybersecurity assessment activities. And if you're going to do software in a medical device, so this has some hardware that touches patients in addition to the firmware and software that's part of the device, then you need a traditional design control procedure in addition to those four procedures. But if you're just doing software as a medical device, do yourself a favor and get those four procedures in place and follow them. build yourself a design history file with a good foundation. That's how I describe this. These 4 are your foundation. And if you don't have the foundation, you're building your entire company on the beach with no foundation at all, and it's going to collapse as soon as you try to put it in front of the FDA. Now, this next step, once you have the procedures in place, you're going to create some initial documents that are going to be the foundation of your development project. One of those is a software description. There's a place in the 510K, it says attach your software description here. If you don't have that, you can't submit to the FDA. So you need a description of your software. They want it to be very detailed. That's one of the problems that I see is companies say, well, I want software that does this. And they'll describe it verbally in a couple sentences. But no, we're looking for a multi-page document that's very detailed, telling you how you want the software to work, what language it'll be coded in, what work environment it's going to be used in. So you need to describe your software in detail. The next part is a document called an architecture diagram. Architecture is the different modules of the software shown visually on a page, sort of a flow chart. The information that the software handles goes from one function to the next function to the next function. So you have to draw that out in a diagram for the FDA. That's the second document. And there's some strategy behind that because you want to keep certain information secure. So when something goes wrong, it doesn't screw everything up. So designing your architecture for security as well as for functionality is critical. The third thing is you need a risk management plan. So what kinds of risk management activities are you going to conduct? What standards are you going to apply? How are you going to identify the hazards that are involved? How are you going to estimate those hazards? What kind of risk controls are you going to put in place? How are you going to decide risk control A versus B versus C, that risk control option analysis? What are the best risk controls for a certain type of hazard? How are you going to verify and validate that those risk controls actually work? That plan for all those risk management activities needs to be spelled out in writing, and then you have to actually execute them. And at the end, you write a report showing how you did all those activities. In the submission, you have to attach the plan, the hazard analysis, which is usually an Excel spreadsheet, but it could be another format. And then the third piece is a report summarizing the activities you conducted. If you don't have those 3 documents, you can't submit to the FDA. So come up with a plan. I'm not saying you have to do all those activities at the start of the project, but you have to have a plan for them at the start of the project. And then the last piece is you need a software requirement specification. This should indicate each of the functions you want your software to do, and it should also include the 8 different risk controls that they want for cybersecurity. So there are cybersecurity risk controls they want. They list 8 of them. They say, what page can we find this in your documentation? You want them very clearly identified in your SRS or software requirement spec. So those are the 4 documents you should start with at the beginning of a project. Not all your documentation for software, but those 4 things. And they're not set in stone. They're drafts. So you can revise them and improve them over time. But at least come up with a draft of those 4 documents that you can start with so you can share it with whoever's going to do the software development. And they can agree, oh, okay, this is what you want the software to work, do. This is what you want it to, how you want it to be structured, how you want the information to flow and be compartmentalized. Oh, this is how we're going to do the risk analysis and what activities are going to be done and who's going to do them. And then these are the software requirements bulleted out. Those 4 documents are going to create a great foundation for your statement of work in your consulting master service agreement with that firm that's going to do your software development. Or if you're doing it internally, before you spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, or if you're lucky, tens of thousands, but more likely over $100,000 on software development, make sure your team has those 4 documents. And we say come up with a plan and then have your inputs. Well, these would be some of those inputs, these 4 documents. We're going to have a plan. We're going to describe the software. We're going to have an architecture diagram, a risk management plan, and software requirement specs. Now we're ready to start development, but not before you get at least drafts of these first 4 in place. Now, if your company has all 4 of these things in place, and I'm sorry here, I'm sharing my screen. Part of it's blocked out. So let me fix that. Whoop. So you might have a draft of these and you might put it in your statement of work, but when you're done with that, now you're ready to hire somebody to do this, whether they're a full-time employee, whether you already have a team, or you hire an outsourced party. So if you're looking for that, we have a recommendation. So we actually list an expert here that you might try contacting. It's the company's Bold Type. They're located in Orlando, Florida. Try contacting them. We have other companies that we've worked with as well, but this is a company that hits exactly what you're looking for. Number one, they do medical device development all the time. That's what they specialize in. Number two, they're ISO 13485 certified already. They have experience with both software in a device as well as a medical device. And they're companies that just work on medical devices, so they know the 62304 standard. So that's where you want to be at. If you have a product that you already developed and you come to us and say, can you help us get a 510K? And I say, well, do you have any documentation? And they're like, well, what documentation do you need? Well, I have 22 different documents that I need, 10 of them for the software. And they're like, well, which ones? A software description. Well, no. An architecture diagram. Well, no. Risk management documentation. Well, no. So all the documents that I need you to start with, you didn't even create those and you're done and you're asking me if you can submit now. No. Well, how long will it take? Well, after you restart the entire project and redesign your software because it doesn't meet any of the regulatory requirements and revalidate it, maybe a year from now we'll be ready to submit. Because these projects usually take somewhere in the order of 4 months just to come up with a plan and submit it to the FDA and get their feedback on it. And then 4 more months to actually execute the plan, and then 4 more months of review. So a year from now, maybe. But the company's like, but I have software that works. But yeah, but I can't validate that because you have nothing documented and you didn't follow the requirements. And you're missing requirements that are regulatory requirements. So start with your foundation, come up with those first 4 documents, hire somebody that's trained. If they don't know 62304, if they don't know those numbers, if that doesn't instantly tell them exactly what kind of project this is, keep looking for a better vendor. Somebody else joined here and they said, and they have a good question. So I'm going to put this on here and I will stop the sharing. So we'll see what we got. Is a software FMEA needed to, in addition to the risk analysis, hazard analysis for software as a medical device? So software failure modes and effects analysis, that is one type of risk analysis. So it's not in addition to, it is a risk analysis. A failure modes and effects analysis is a type of risk analysis. It's not the only type. There are fault tree diagrams. That's another type. There are multiple types of software risk analysis tools that you can use, but any risk analysis tool will be acceptable, but you should the standard for it. So if you're looking for a standard, look to 14971, and it lists several of them. FMEA is one of them. It's not the only one. If you look at 80002-1, that has examples in there too. So follow them. But the fault tree is usually the better choice for things that are software. It's also a top-down approach. So if you have a complaint, it becomes easier to figure out, well, what caused this? So you start at the top and work your way down. Whereas a fault, an FMEA, you start with all the things that can fail, but software doesn't fail the same way hardware does. So an FMEA is much better suited for working bottom-up approach when you have components. You can still use an FMEA, but the fault tree is a better tool. And to answer the basic question, yes, you can use an FMEA. You don't have to do some other tool also. But if you haven't built it yet, probably you want to think about what is the best tool to be doing this in the first place, and it might not be an FMEA for software. I hope that answered your question there. If you have any other questions about software, you can contact me. So you can go to our website, medicaldeviceacademy.com, go to the Contact Us page and schedule a meeting with me. You can schedule a meeting with Lindsay Walker. She's our Director of Sales. She can point you to the place where you can purchase those 4 procedures. She can give you a proposal or an invoice for those 4 procedures. And if you're more in depth, let's say you bought the procedures or you made similar ones on your own, and now you're trying to figure out, do we have enough detail? Now you're to the point where we can be a little bit more help. We can sell you the procedure. We can tell you what documents to create first. But once you create those documents, now we can say, okay, let us review these and give you feedback on them. We have templates for all the documents, but you have to create the original draft, and then we can give you more help saying, well, this section should be more detailed. This section is inconsistent with another section. This section doesn't comply with the guidance that or the standard that you're referencing. So make sure that you do it in order. Procedure first, then those 4 documents, then get some feedback. Look for a vendor that knows 62304, knows how to do a risk analysis for software, and then hire them, and then we can start into reviewing documents. And if you've already got something that's working, think of that as a proof of concept. That's not a finished product. And I know you wanted to go to market with a proof of concept, but the FDA says no, because you have to follow these standards. So you have a proof of concept. Congratulations. Now let's help you make that something we can get on the market. Thank you very much for joining. If you found this helpful, please share it with other people. And if you have a suggestion for next week's, please put it in the comments. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.